Hello, so this is WF7i Homebrew. I thought I'd give a little video update on what I'm working on here, just for those who might be interested. So as I alluded to before, this is a simple circuit. It's a circuit for a very simple direct conversion receiver. I built this before, and I built a single band version for 40 meters. It worked pretty well. It's not an amazing receiver by any means, but it's very small part count, and it actually worked pretty decent. It's pretty sensitive. So I wanted to make a multi-band version, and that's what I'm working on now. And so I started out building the oscillator, which is kind of this portion down here. Now this is what's called a Colpitts Oscillator. For those who may not be familiar, you can kind of tell Colpitts Oscillator because you have these two capacitors that are sort of the same value, and then you feed it into a transistor which is inside of this chip here. And then there's an inductor down here, this L2, and along with this variable C1 that helps define the resonant frequency for the Colpitts portion of this circuit. So when I build these circuits, I usually start with the oscillator and try to get them to function. And I ran into some problems with that, kind of set me back a little bit because I had a noisy power supply that was putting some garbage basically into the signal, and I thought it was the circuit that was the fault, but it was actually the power supply. When I run it with a battery, it's fine. So one of the things I want to do, just looking at this diagram, is I want to do a multi-band. So there's going to be, I was going to do 4 bands. I think I'm going to back off and just do 3. I think I'm getting overly ambitious, and what I found is some of the multi-position rotary switches, when you start getting into 4 decks, they get very expensive, and I didn't really want to spend a lot of money on this. It's mainly just for fun. So if parts start costing $40-50, I kind of start rethinking what I'm doing. So I think I'm going to do 3 bands. So I'm going to have a rotary switch, and I'll switch between different oscillators. So each oscillator will have a different coil, different, for this L2. Same capacitor, same variable capacitor, but we switch the coils around for each band. And then also I'm thinking about having different front end filters. So this is the antenna coming in over here. It's very susceptible to AM breakthrough and strong signals, out of band signals and stuff, so you really need to have some filtering here for the antenna port. So I want to go ahead and have kind of a multi-position 3-band rotary switch with different filtering components here. Here they're using a kind of a parallel LC circuit, and I'll use something similar to that as I did in my previous design. Worked pretty well. If I can have enough positions on my rotary switch, enough poles, I should be able to accommodate being able to switch between different front-end filters as well as different oscillators, if that makes sense. So I'm thinking of doing is 20, 40, and 80 meter bands, pretty generic, 3-band rig. And so that's what I'm working on right now. So I also want to mention a frequency counter I bought. It's by QRP Guys. It's called the QRP Guys Digital Dial Frequency Counter. So I'm going to use that as a display for this direct conversion multi-band radio receiver, which looks really fun. Looks like it should work well. It came in this little package here with all the little parts. The manual's online, so you just go online to assemble it. I have not even taken it out of the bag yet. So it wasn't even really a box, it just came in an envelope. It's pretty cheap. Trying to see what the cost was. 20 bucks. I mean, for 20 bucks, it's hard to go wrong with that. And this is the workbench here. So I built a Colpitts and a Hartley, because for a while I thought the Colpitts wasn't working too well, but it turns out it was fine. So this is the Colpitts portion, the little 3904 transistor. This is the Hartley with an MPF102 JFET, and each one has its own coil. I took the coil out of the Colpitts and kind of labeled it here. So these are values that are specific to the Colpitts for 40 meter band. So it's got its own coil for 40 meters, and it's got its own special capacitors for 40 meters. And so what this does is allow me to tune the 40 meter band precisely. When I do a rotation of this variable capacitor here, the oscillator will go from about 7 to about 7.5. In practice, it's probably going to be 6.8 to 7.7 or something. It's not going to be exact. But that's what those components do. And so what I'm going to do with the multi-position switch is I'll have different clusters of these components like this, one for each band. So I'll have a 80, 40, and 20, each with its own coil set of capacitors. And also, like I said earlier, there's going to be some antenna filtering with each band. So that way, you know, some of the noise and things is filtered out of the circuit, so I don't get overwhelmed with noise from out-of-band signals. So that's pretty much it. There's going to be a lot of assembly with this. Obviously, this is just kind of an experimental board here. This probably isn't going to go into the radio like that at all. I just kind of threw that together to do some testing. So the actual board's going to have a NE602 chip in there, which has an oscillator in it and a mixer. And so I won't be using these discrete, you know, transistors. I'll just be using the chip for that. So as I start building it, I'll shoot a couple more videos. It's probably going to take me a while because I'm just working at it here and there as I have time. It's just kind of a fun project. I'll be building the oscillator coil capacitor combinations for 80 and 20 meters next. And then when the rotary switch comes in, probably what I'll start doing is actually building the board to house all this stuff. And then the radio will gradually start taking shape. And then, of course, I'll have to build the display unit and stuff like that. So that's pretty much it. Should be a fun little project. Again, it's kind of a circuit I'm familiar with. I just wanted to do a multi-band version of the little direct conversion receiver. And I can pan over here and show you that one. It's not much to look at, but this is the 40 meter version I built a few years ago. So this one I put in a main tuner and a fine tuner. And on the back, it's actually got a RF gain control, so it's got a variable resistor back here to cut down the signal level from the antenna so it doesn't get too overloaded. And of course it just goes out to a pair of headphones here. So the new radio will look kind of like this, but I'll have a display up here. I don't think I'm going to do a fine tuning on that one because I don't think that was super useful. So it's going to have a digital display, tuning knob's going to run on a 9-volt battery, and it'll just probably also go out to a pair of headphones. I could maybe put a speaker in there. I don't know if I'm going to bother though. So that's about it, guys. We'll keep you posted. 7-3.